When we confront acts of extreme serial violence, our immediate reflex is to label the perpetrator a monster. Labeling someone this way suggests they belong to a different species, an anomaly that exists outside the human experience. We seek a singular, born evil gene, or a visible mental illness. A simple biological label would make threats easy to identify and isolate before they ever move from thought to action. Criminologists and behavioral analysts have spent decades searching for this unifying cause. They have mapped brains and studied childhoods at length, yet that singular biological trigger remains elusive. There is no specific gene that guarantees violence. Relying on Hollywood stereotypes creates a false sense of security, leaving us blind to how these offenders actually operate in the real world. Extreme violence is the result of a complex intersection between biological predispositions, early environmental stress, and a continuous series of destructive personal choices. Most individuals who live with psychopathic traits, such as low empathy or grandiosity, navigate their lives without ever committing a physical crime. A specific personality profile is not a prophecy of violence. Many prolific serial offenders do not meet the strict clinical criteria for psychopathy. The psychiatric diagnosis alone cannot account for their behavior. In the absence of a uniform diagnosis or a pure biological mandate, we have to examine the specific psychological patterns that these individuals share. Behavioral experts focus on a set of overlapping psychological patterns. These are the specific cognitive traits that allow a person to mentally bypass their own morality and rationalize the unjustifiable. Violence begins with elaborate internal fantasies. For individuals dealing with deep frustration or perceived inadequacies, these private mental loops provide a sense of escape and empowerment. This chart shows how cognitive distortions function. When a feeling like rejection enters the mind, it is filtered through biased logic. The offender reshapes the narrative until the blame for their own dark thoughts is placed entirely on their future targets. This mental shift relies on emotional detachment. The offender views their target as an object or a prop. By stripping away a person's humanity in their mind, the offender prepares themselves to commit acts they otherwise could not justify. The primary motivator for this behavior is a compulsive need for power. Every action is a calculated exercise in maintaining total authority over another human being's environment and physical safety. When these factors combine, the mental safeguards that typically prevent harm are gradually eroded. This degradation makes the decision to commit a physical act feel like a logical next step. Once the first act is committed, the cycle of escalation begins. The repetition of these acts begins to mirror the pathways of a chemical addiction in the brain. This graph illustrates the process of psychological desensitization. The offender requires more extreme acts to achieve the same psychological reward. The intervals between their actions shrink, even as the intensity of each event increases. Their internal reality becomes increasingly volatile, yet their external presentation remains outwardly unchanged. The social persona they project stays remarkably consistent and calm. They use superficial charm as a tool. By mimicking empathy and politeness, they can manipulate their environment and exploit the trust of those around them without ever forming a genuine connection. This allows them to maintain a complex double life. They compartmentalize their actions, transitioning from a crime scene back into society to function as dependable coworkers, quiet neighbors, or family men. Their most effective asset is not their capacity for violence, but this social camouflage. They hide by mastering the performance of a life that looks exactly like everyone else's. These overlapping psychological patterns do not serve as a predetermined path toward becoming a killer. Many people experience low empathy, cognitive distortions, or escapist fantasies without ever harming another person. These traits exist in varying degrees across the general population. These offenders are a product of human psychology, however distorted. They occupy the same biological and social frameworks as the rest of society, looking and behaving like the people we encounter every day. The transition from thought to violence is not an automatic process. It is a choice. When a complex history of traits meets a specific opportunity, the behavior culminates in a conscious decision to commit harm. By abandoning the myth of the monster, we can begin to recognize the observable human patterns that allow this behavior to hide. Understanding the psychology of the predator is the first step in seeing what is hidden in broad daylight.